Kraus graduated from William and Mary in 1997 with a degree in accounting before he went on to earn an MBA at the University of Maine. And then following his education, he gained knowledge in a number of different positions that are related to financial services and business and product development, which equipped him to launch global software solutions and products as the founder and CEO of Family Digital Incorporated and as the CEO of Relify, which is his current position as well. Family Digital offers a real-time consumer messaging service called Family App for businesses and organizations to safely provide services to families. And then Relify is a content performance company that global enterprise customers rely on to produce outstanding content based on company-specific AI. The Relify platform improves lead quality and increases engagement while simplifying the content production process. And then being an entrepreneur and a serial executive, Peter specializes in new product business development, visionary design, experience in travel, real estate, and architecture, just to name a few. And he also enjoys spending his free time outdoors and is an active sailor. So to get started, you can just let us know how you're doing, what you've been up to.
Well, speaking of outdoor activities, I went camping last weekend with my kids and a couple of my siblings. That was a lot of fun to get out. But enjoying this weather, working a lot and playing a lot. So yeah, happy to be here. I actually haven't been back on campus for a while. So.
Oh, awesome. How is it coming back to campus every so often?
It is surprising. It's good to see you guys back out here in person. But wow, just the number of new buildings and facilities and programs, it's just awesome what you have available to you now.
Yeah, awesome. So let's talk a little bit about, before we get into your William and Mary experience, we're going to start from the beginning and talk about, growing up, what were your interests and how do you think that shaped your career path in the entrepreneurial side of yourself now?
That's a great question. So first of all, I was a townie. I grew up on the Yorktown side of Williamsburg. For those of you who haven't been off campus much, I grew up in Queens Lake, which is just south of the Parkway towards Yorktown. But spent a lot of time on the river, just like you heard about the sailing. And that, I guess, taught me a lot of lessons about adaptability and about just dealing with changing conditions. And then I grew up in a large family, relatively large, 5 kids, and 2 very involved parents, who I actually got into business with when I was in high school. And then probably the memory that is most connected with my entrepreneurial experience is I really love design. I love architecture. When I was about 12, I bought a drafting table. This is before the days of CAD and everything, where you have a piece of paper and a ruler to draw with, and just started sketching things, and ended up at William & Mary taking every architecture class that was available in the art school. So I guess those are probably the 3 memories that stick out of my mind the most. Is a lot of boating as a kid, growing up in a large family, and just really loving design.
Did you take architecture with Professor Peace?
I did, okay. Yes. I know him well.
Yeah, I took architecture with him too, but he just retired.
Oh, did he really?
Yeah, I feel like to have taken it with him, but one of his former students is now the head of the
No kidding.
Yeah. But yeah, sorry, side note.
No, I need to reach out to him and congratulate him. It's,
so what else were you involved in at William & Mary? Were you on the sailing team? Or?
No, I wasn't on the sailing team. I was not a typical student. I was actually pretty heavily involved in my own businesses during school. So there was a pretty practical application to what I was learning through the process.
What kind of businesses were you?
Construction, real estate, and then my senior year, I started a company building cell phone towers.
Wow. What made you decide to do that while in college?
It's just doing the next thing. I mean, when it started out, like many college students, I had to find a way to pay my way through school, and got recruited by a local builder. And then when he found out I was an accounting student, he's like, "Hey, we need somebody to take over the books." So next thing you know, I was actually putting what I was learning right into use, and then I implemented a scheduling or a estimating program for him.
So accounting, I feel like to the average person, maybe who isn't in accounting, aka me, accounting doesn't seem super entrepreneurial. It seems very straightforward. So how did you kind of leverage that part of your education into a career specific to entrepreneurship?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, the reason I never envisioned myself being a CPA. I'm not a CPA. But I got into it because I got a call from my grandfather one day saying, "Hey, Peter, heard you're interested in business. I would recommend that you learn the language of business, which is accounting." And so I thought, okay, we had to take the required classes, and I absolutely loved it. Particularly the cost accounting and the intermediate accounting classes. Kind of lost interest by the time I got to tax and auditing, but at that point I needed to finish my degree.
Good. So moving on from that, why did you decide to do an MBA in marketing rather than a master's in accounting?
I guess mostly because I didn't see myself being an accountant, and I discovered through my practical experience and also through my time at William & Mary that I kind of liked the other side of business, more creative side. You don't really want creative accountants, right? But I found that it kind of exercised the other side of my brain. Wanted to run it.
What kind of practical advice might you have for students who maybe are studying something that they don't see themselves pursuing, I guess, in that way?
Yeah.
Recommend pivoting?
Well, life's full of pivots for sure. I think looking back on it, one of the best things about William & Mary, and particularly when I was going through business school, was the combination of a business degree and a liberal arts program. And I think that's really served me well in the path I've been on, because it enables you to really look at problems from different angles, right? So it's not some of the other programs out there. Like I remember, no offense to any UVA alums, but I remember comparing notes with a buddy who was going through the accounting program and comes to me. They took 2 semesters in their intro to accounting when we took 1. And that allowed us to then do something else the second semester. So anyway, the bottom line is having the broad education has enabled me to look at business problems from multiple perspectives and to be adaptable in my thinking. And then, when I look at the William & Mary program that I went through, and I would imagine it's similar today, it's one of the most important assets that you're getting coming through the program.
Okay, so speaking about pivoting and transitions, how did you transition from your William & Mary career into being the CEO of multiple companies? What does that in between period look like?
Wow, there's a lot of steps in the in between. Right, my 25th.
So wash your hands, everybody. Max, take your shoes off. You're stepping on the pillow.
So we when I was coming out of school, it was kind of approaching the peak of the .com boom, and so it was a very different business environment. I just had 8 job offers coming out of school, and I remember I had some sage advice from a friend saying, in those days of the internet, it was really focused on sort of accelerating a facet of the business, mostly marketing. not really revolutionizing the whole business like we're seeing today with digital transformation. So you said was look for models that cut costs, and look for teams that have done it before. And it's great advice when I was looking through all 8 job offers, and I was lucky enough to land with a startup in Washington, D.C. And and again, lucky enough to them to just give me a shot because I didn't have a background in software development. And but we very quickly got into expense reporting, and I suddenly found myself drawing on a lot of the lessons that I remember from school, like cost accounting classes and so forth. And that served me really, really well for the first 4 years or so of that venture, of understanding accounting, understanding strategy, and being able to apply that, even at a young age, young part of my career, to software that really made a difference in these big companies we're selling into.
So you moving into a tech startup, in that period of time specifically, we would define that as opportunity discovery, which is seeing opportunities where others do not. So how do you recommend seeing opportunities? It can be hard to kind of filter out the noise, especially if you're looking at 8 different offers or something like that, but in anything.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I could just give some illustrations. And I don't know if a lesson will pop out of it, but one of the early opportunities that we saw, remember I took to our CEO. So we first started the company, we were actually hosting software for startup companies. This is the beacon.com boom. And they actually started going out of business at a rate of 5 a month. So our customer base was shrinking very quickly. And we knew we needed to pivot, and we had just gotten into providing expense reporting services for the startups. And so the pivot number 1 was that I went to the CEO and said, hey, we need to focus more on this and also on travel services and selling it to larger companies. And it was kind of it's kind of shaking my boots a little bit going to his office because it was a very bold recommendation from a guy who's just out of business school. But he actually immediately sent a memo out to the board and the executive team and said, I think Peter's done us the right thing. So that's it. And then he gave me a colleague to do marketing and 1 software developer to go focus on launching this new solution. So I guess that was I didn't know any different. I mean, I don't want to say it was any particular formula or anything. I was a young guy without any obligations and figured, what the heck? Let me just state the obvious, I guess pivot number 2 I can talk about within that world was, as we started to get traction, we realized that there were 2 business functions, travel management and expense reporting, that were typically separated in companies, but they were better together. And so we I remember reading a book on how to evaluate it was called Blue Ocean Strategy, and how to evaluate new opportunities, new marketplaces that haven't been invented yet. And so I literally just took that book and, copy paste, applied our opportunity to it, took it to the CEO and said, where did you get this? And I said, well, I just copied it from this book. Said, this is perfect. So we need to do. So anyway, that led to really launching a differentiated product. And that led to eventually selling it 6 years later to Concur. And then with Concur as a public company, we had the horsepower to really roll it out globally and just disrupt 2 related sectors, travel management and expense reporting.
Very cool. Wow. Yeah. So another opportunity you we could talk about, what was the opportunity you saw that led you to launch Family Digital? Can you kind of talk a little bit more about what that is and then how you launched it?
So fast forward quite a few steps from what I just told you. So sold the startup Outpass to Concur, and we ran Concur out for 6 years and sold that to S&P, German software company. And then after 3 years of that, I realized that I was just tired of being far away from the startup world and part of a 75,000 person company with 250,000 customers. It's a very different world. And we sort of run our course. So along the way, though, I had two separate experiences, but they were related to what became Family Digital. The first one was as I began having a family of my own, and there were 5 siblings in my family, 5 siblings in my wife's family, and it's a lot of birthdays to keep track of now, by the way. Everybody's married, there's 15 grandkids on each side. So I started thinking about families a lot, and I realized that at the time we were launching a small business version of Concur, and I realized that there's really not much difference between a family and a small business. And yet, as I looked around at different platforms out there, most of the fam tech is not organized the same way an enterprise software platform is. And so we saw this opportunity for something that treated families like a business unit, and all these interesting use cases started to emerge. That's one side of it. The other side of it was, as you'll find in your life journey, lots of opportunities will come across, and I had some great advice from somebody along the way that just turn over rocks, see what's underneath. Like you'll find so many different things to look at. Well, one of them was, I guess, partway through my journey at Concur, I got to know a former CEO of Expedia, and we started talking about the travel industry, and particularly how fragmented the activity sector is, like what do you do when you get to the destination. And so we were putting a deal together to spin out part of Expedia and buy another company. There was a market called Viator, and I was going to have a product, I was going to lead Concur, and all this stuff. And as I dug into the details of what is a very fragmented sector, I realized that over 50% of the sales of tickets is actually to local families. So all these companies were focused on the wrong direction. They were focused on trying to capture the traveler before they get to the destination. And that only represented about half a percent of all ticket sales. And I thought, wow, if you just spin this around and you create a marketplace to sell activities to local families, then you actually capture the market and you encourage all the vendors to come on the platform. So anyway, that was the original idea, along with the messaging platform that led to Family Digital. Now, how Family Digital connects to Relify is we were gearing up to launch our products, and we hired an agency in New York to just test the market. And of course, our target audience, young parents, they were responding really well to our messaging. And when it came to the channel, we realized, of course, most of the young parents like blogs. Like they don't like ads hitting you in the face on Facebook. They respond well to high quality organic content. And I remember that I had met this entrepreneur in Germany who'd been applying artificial intelligence to content production pretty well, and reached out to him and said, hey, we're interested in your model. Have you done it in English? And he said, no, we actually were looking for a launch partner in the US. So anyway, that gave way to forming Relify a year ago during the pandemic. So suddenly I found myself being a fractional CEO of 2 companies.
What was that like in the pandemic? I know, you were talking with Amanda earlier and you said that you were already virtual at, Family Digital, but what was it like, starting that up with someone, all the way across the world during the pandemic?
That is a great question. It's been the most wild experience of my life. So I have, so Relify is a joint venture. And my venture partner in Germany is a guy named Karl-Heinz Land. He was one of the senior execs at MicroStrategy. And to this day, I still haven't met him. It's been a year and a half. We've raised over $3 million together. We've assembled 30 employees. We've got 2 business units, and it's all been virtual. The 2 of us, at least.
It's kind of funny to think, like, just when you're starting out William & Mary and the whole .com boom was just starting, and now you're like running an entire business online.
Things have changed, and yet some things remain the same, right?
So kind of going back to something you said about connecting Relify and Family Digital, both of those I feel like rely on people in a way. At Relify, you mentioned that you're challengers and innovators, a passionate team of people that goes above and beyond. And your mission is to empower businesses to reach more people by producing relevant content. So what is the importance of collaboration in people to you in entrepreneurship?
I mean, people are the most important, without a doubt, especially in the software business, but of course, what business is in the software business now. I guess I'd go back to my, if I could do college again, I'd probably study history and economics. And in my history class, one of my favorite classes here was a visiting professor who spent decades in Berlin studying, how is it that Germany fell into the Nazi, situation. And I'll never forget him saying that all human failure stems from apathy, which is the inability to stand in somebody else's shoes for a period of time and understand what it feels like. And of course, the opposite is empathy. And I would say that empathy is probably the most important factor in a particularly software business. Empathy, of course, for each other when you're building the business, for your business partners, but most importantly, understand your customer, like really, really understanding them and what makes them tick. And getting immediate feedback on the product and getting basically a triage put in place where you can understand what changes you can make to your offer that will most greatly improve the life of your customer. So it really is about being empathetic to customers. I remember the early days of our startup Outtask, which became Concur. I mean, our customer conferences were basically love fests. I mean, we had spent so much time with our customers day in and day out building product for them that when we finally got a chance on an annual basis to get together, we were like best friends. Yeah, they were almost an extension of our team in the early days.
That's awesome. Speaking about your William & Mary experience, another question I had for you that you kind of already answered is, what is something that you wish, going back, that you wish you took advantage of while you were at William & Mary, or like what you had the time to? Because it sounds like you had a very full William & Mary experience, doing businesses outside of your school and stuff too. But is there anything you wish you took advantage of?
Yeah, I got an easy answer there. I wish I'd asked more questions of the professors and just gone and visited them more, because you've got amazing people here that you can take. And I was running businesses concurrently, so it wasn't really until later in my kind of senior year that I started taking even my personal tax questions to my tax professor. And he was like, "Oh, I'm so glad you asked." And he went through all the details on the whiteboard. Wow, this is true. This is like I'm getting something from my time here and vice versa. So, and of course they absolutely love it when you come and talk to them.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like that's been true of my experience as well. One time I went and asked a professor a question and I ended up changing my major, so definitely. But, so my last question for you before we get into audience questions, if everyone in the hub, you can see to my right, our pillars of entrepreneurial thinking, which I've talked about a little bit, and if you're online, Amanda's gonna put them in the chat, but based on your entrepreneurial journey and what we've heard so far of your story, which one of our pillars do you want to work on leveraging more and why?
I need the cheats.
Yeah, the cheat sheet's over there. So they're opportunity and discovery, failing wisely, improvisation, collaboration, openness to risk, tolerance for ambiguity, grit, and self-direction.
Yeah, wow.
It's funny. I guess people call me an entrepreneur, but I think I struggle with the fear of failure. It's probably the first one, openness to risk. I probably tend to overanalyze things. I probably try to do things myself too often instead of just relying on just the great team we pull together that have a lot of experience. So maybe that's another one I'm stumbling into there. But I think when you try to do things yourself. When I try to do things myself, it's probably because I'm worried about the risk of not understanding it or not controlling it. But you can't move fast, and you can't actually keep up with competition or beat competition if you try to do everything yourself, and you're not willing to take risks.
Yeah.
It's funny because these are both high. I mean, my whole career has been about risk.
Yeah, definitely. I think that leaves us in a really good place to start our Q&A. So if you are online, you're welcome to raise your hand or send your question to Amanda. And then if you're in person, obviously you can raise your hand to introduce yourself and share your question.
Hi, my name is Melody. So the question I had was, you mentioned earlier how you did some work with your family in high school, and then with your experience with Family Digital, kind of treating families as small businesses. And it's funny you say that because sometimes I often hear like it's not good to mix family and business. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to ask about your experience with that and if there's any main takeaways you have from that.
That's a great question. There's so much talk about work-life balance. What I found is it doesn't work. Especially if you get into a job that you really love. So for me, I've learned more like work-life integration. Because it's like impossible to separate. My wife and I actually work with each other in Family App. So she's essentially the managing director of that business right now. And so we talk around the clock. And so anyway, in terms of integration, it's a matter of creating boundaries and rules to follow and having people hold you accountable, right? So one of the rules recently we put into place is if my wife or I talk about business at the dinner table, we have to put $1 in a cookie jar. And that goes to taking the kids out for ice cream or something. And it's kind of full right now. So, but I think the deeper thing related to that is find your personal why. Like not just your work why, but your personal why, and make sure that what you're doing throughout life is aligned with that. Because what I found is whenever I get out of alignment, then I always have regrets. So my personal why is I love being with my family. I love sailing. I love being outdoors. Of course, I love building businesses and investing in people. So anyway, it's a matter of organizing time, being disciplined about it, so that you're doing each of those things that really make you tick.
That was a good question. 2 weeks ago, we had Beth Comstock, who's, for those of you who don't know, is one of the co-founders of Hulu. She said a very similar thing about having your own personal story.
Yeah, it's really important because I've seen, even recently, we had to let a senior person go because he is taking some actions that were not good, and it was like he was out of alignment on that.
Thank you for your question.
So I have a two-part question. The first one is, where'd you go camping last weekend?
Yeah.
So I'll let you answer that one first, and then I'll ask a follow-up to that.
So we opted for, my brother lives here in Williamsburg, actually, and my sister lives in Virginia Beach, my parents live in Yorktown, so we opted for Newport News Park.
Oh.
Because my daughter had a swim meet in Newport News as well.
The swimming thing is real.
Yeah.
We're in there as well. The follow-up question to that is to see if you can connect for us, like what the outdoors does for you as a founder. I mean, I get it as someone who likes the outdoors as well. It's something that fills me up. But what does it do for you when you think about how you operate your businesses? If it does provide anything to you, being out on the water or just being outdoors? Yeah,
that's a great question. So one of the hardest things I've found as a startup CEO is being tactically overwhelmed. Like just doing. And the buck stops with you, it's like, just as I was walking in the door, I got a request from somebody in Germany who's been locked out of HubSpot for a while. It's just like tactical. And somebody else probably should have answered that, but they're offline. So I'm like, I'll fix it for us. This works now. So the problem is if you do that too much, then you don't have time to really think about the why questions, the strategy questions. And if you miss the strategy questions, strategic planning, then you can't leave. And so for me, the outdoors and particularly like getting out on the water, where you have a broad space, is such a change in pace, such a change in your surroundings that it like forces my brain to recalibrate from like staring at a computer screen or looking at my cell phone or whatever else. So I think that's why I have to do that. And I've started taking a walk in the morning and a walk at night, very deliberately, just to at least 15 minutes to clear my brain.
I feel like that's a good thing that's come out of the pandemic, is a lot of people, I think, go on walks now because of that.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Just silver lining.
So I'm curious, you've obviously had a bunch of positions leading up to being like CEO of Relify and Family Digital now. So I'm just curious, like which of your past positions would you say gave you the most valuable experience as it relates to like being in those positions today?
That is a great question. Let me think about it to answer it. I talk about two of them. The first was actually just out of school. I was a product owner and business development guy who was responsible for partnerships it was kind of crazy. So I would go around and meet a bunch of other startups or a bunch of other companies and talk about integrating their services to our platform. And so in a very short period of time, I sized up like 30 different businesses to look at their business model, to look at the viability, to see what they would add to our ecosystem. And so and then I was able to see how close my predictions were to what happened because of the dot-com crash. And so that gave me kind of the ability to, and it'd be similar to like if you joined a early stage fund that's sizing up companies to invest in, it gives you the skill to kind of read the whole business plan quickly and the whole business model and size up the strength of the model. So that's been helpful. And then I think the other side of the spectrum that's helped tremendously is for about a year, I was on a team that was managing the integration of companies that we would acquire or invest in at Concur. So we started something called Perfect Trip Fund because we found that the business travel sector was really underfunded, underinvested. And so we would either acquire companies or we would integrate them. And so I would have to go in and kind of size up how to best do that and how they were operating. So Anything that sort of gives you cross-functional visibility into the business is helpful. Because my background is not in any particular business function. It's more on the product side. I find boards tend to look for either somebody who knows the numbers, somebody who can manage the risk, or somebody who can run sales. And my background is not sales. My background is not law. I mean, I took a lot of business law classes. I've negotiated a lot of contracts. And so I guess they're looking at my county background. I hope not.
I actually have a question kind of going off of that, like, with your architecture background, how have you applied that to what you're doing today?
That's a great question. You know, design feeds into marketing. There's a heavy overlay between marketing and design. I would say they did a survey of software startup leaders about what's most important understanding, and 50% said marketing, not even software development, actually understanding product market fit. And then 30% said design. And then 20% was actually your development capacity, your proficiency with the technology. So it's like the most important part is actually that intersection between design and like being able to recognize form and function meeting the customer need. And that's like the ease, that's something that he talked about a lot, the balance of form and function. So.
Definitely. I wasn't interested in pursuing architecture, but I ended up taking his classes. He was like, you'll be a better designer.
Yeah, it's very true.
Any other questions?
Another one. I was wondering if you could talk about a failure and what you learned from that, how you thought about that failure in order to learn something from it, and then
that's a great question.
What that enabled.
First of all, don't be afraid of failing. Back to my openness to risk. And of course, they'll say it's true, fail forward, fail fast. That's absolutely a truism. But for me, it was I took a job partway through my career, towards the end of my Concur tenure, to launch something that was going to be a supply chain bypass strategy. And I guess I was feeling pretty confident at the time, or maybe I was arrogant. I thought, we can do this, because I had just launched Concur Pay, which was a settlement process, and we had so much leverage in the market. And I figured, I'm just walk into the suppliers and I'd say, hey, we can save you all this money if you just go direct connect to our customers. And I organized a meeting with 8 of our top suppliers, 10 of our top customers, the summit in Chicago, and everybody's like, yeah, we're going to do this. And then it took 4 years to get the first implementation done. It was so painful. And my career kind of hit a bit of I was on a circular pattern because I signed up for it. So I guess that mistake was being assuming that leverage is enough to make a change, and being a little bit too arrogant because we had so many successes leading up to that point. So humility. That's when I look for team members, the 2 things that are really about coachability and commitment, like how aligned is your personal why with the company's why. And I think I failed in that case on the humility side, like just not understanding like what market forces are really in place. So anyway, that's why I've got plenty of failures. I could talk all night about failures.
Thank you.
I have a question related to that actually. Was there ever a moment in your career where like you hit a failure or a pivot point where you were just in crisis mode and you had to improvise like on your feet or anything like that?
Oh yeah. Going through one of them right now, actually. And that's back to what my comments about the degree you get here, William and Mary, looking at things from multiple facets. Like there's no one way to solve a problem. And the other thing that I think is probably been the most challenging for me as a early stage company leader has been, on the one side, I see all the risks and I have all the sort of fear associated with those risks. And I don't necessarily disclose all of them. I can't in some cases to the team, right? On the other hand, you've got to cast a really solid vision for the team, investors, and all that. So the biggest challenge is finding that balance, right, and staying balanced as really major changes come your way. And you're going to hit. You're going to hit changes when you launch a new product into a new market. In my case, in Glutton for Punishment, we're launching into 2 markets on things, Germany and the US.
Awesome. Any other questions?
So I'm curious, you said obviously you're dealing with that right now, but do you know maybe 3 years where you plan on being, where you plan on going with the companies, if you're going to stay, just literally anything where you see yourself?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one thing I learned early on from actually our first CTO of the first startup I joined was have a light touch, meaning if there's another opportunity that comes up or I always had a box in the corner of my office, and if somebody came threatening me, I'd be like, see that box? Put my stuff in it right now and leave. But 3 years from now for the company, absolutely. In terms of Relify, I'd like to be in multiple languages, multiple countries. We have a 5-year growth plan where we're doubling our revenues every year. So far, we're on track to do that this year or last year. Of course, it's pretty easy to do when you're first starting out. But the hardest thing about a startup is growing at the same rate as you scale. And that's something that, I got a front row seat at some of the best. Concur was a top growth company 5 years in a row, mid-cap software company. So very specifically, our plan, we're doing direct sales right now for companies, but then we're going to be activating sales channels, and then we'll be doing strategic partnerships after that for more scale. On the family side, I'd like to see the audience double every year. We started out the year at 20,000 monthly uniques, and we'll finish the year at 100,000 a month. So we beat that this year for sure.
Yes.
I'm thinking that I want to start a business right now, and I'm now in the first stage. So we're mostly doing the customer discovery, and I assume that you did customer discovery as well and build your first prototype. And my question is, how did you build and test the prototype and get feedback from your customers?
That is a great question, and you're doing the right thing. First of all, just starting it. So start now. As soon as you have the idea, don't be afraid to try. Just try it. You'll learn any way you look at it. You'll learn through the experience. Second of all, customer feedback is everything early on. So specifically with Family App, we're actually at our 5th iteration of the app. We're still working on it. The first one I started on the side when I was still in Washington, D.C. We basically built a really simple front end on top of Foursquare data, and we sent a message out into a long message board in Alexandria, where we were living, and suddenly we had all these people jumping on the app and giving us feedback, which then led to version 2, which added messaging to it because they were saying, hey, I'd like to be able to chat with my family about these activities, and so on and so forth. So you can build prototypes pretty quickly these days with low tech. You don't have to overdo it on the tech stack. So that's helpful. On the Relify side, we already had sort of an existing model set up with the agency in Germany that was applied in the process. And so we knew there were results that customers liked. Our challenge there was to move it onto a software platform so it was scalable and we could launch in multiple languages and we could serve companies of multiple sizes. Because if it's a service business, it's just harder to scale, into larger enterprise customers. So kind of a different approach to prototype there, but very specifically, I purposely set it up knowing the importance of that with the joint venture, where we, on the one hand, we have the family app team is actually using the Relify platform and testing it on various types of content. So we have like our own in-house user of the platform. And then we also have agency partners in Germany and elsewhere that are using it for their customers and with third-party relationships. And so it's almost like baked into how we set up the company, that we can get the feedback loop going quickly. The feedback is everything, so you're focused on the right thing.
That's a good question. Thank you. Any other questions?
I'm happy to answer any of them. Yeah.
You mentioned that it is important to have a reliable team
Yeah.
studying a business. And what was important to you when deciding your team member?
Yeah, that's really good. And I would say, back to what what are some challenges you're dealing with now? I'm dealing with some team challenges right now. So that's why it's really important to size up someone's commitment, like how overlapped their personal why is with the reason for your venture. And the other thing that's been really important is teamwork. So on the family app business, I knew that I wanted to, when it came to actually building coding itself, I knew I wanted a team that really understood like family units, family values. And fortunately, I ended up meeting a development team in Poland. And it's been an absolute pleasure working with our developers there. And it's like their culture really understands the importance of family. And so their personal why is really kind of overlapping nicely with our company. But what you don't want is people who are, they may be really driven and passionate, but their passion is fueled by something that's not really related to your company. And that's sometimes hard to figure out when you're first starting out.
Actually, to build off of that, because you mentioned, having coworkers like on the other side of the world, how are you able to foster that kind of work environment and working virtually and kind of developing like a company culture when a lot of stuff isn't in person?
Right. So we've instituted monthly social hours, and so it's like at 11 o'clock Eastern time and 5 o'clock cocktail hour in Europe. And so some of us will just grab a beer, lunch or something, but our poor West Coast colleagues, we have 3 and 2 in Los Angeles and 1 in San Francisco area. They have just bring coffee. But that's been one. The other thing that's really important as you scale is organizing your schedule. So don't skip one-on-one calls with your core team every week. You gotta have a one-on-one call, you gotta have an agenda that each of you can put information into and you can react to. Number 2, you've gotta have all hands calls frequently, especially during the pandemic, and create an environment where nobody feels stupid for asking a question, And so we do monthly business meetings, monthly social calls, and we do periodic just all hands for various topics that we're covering. The way I've broken it down is I actually have certain business functions that I cover on certain days, so I can really kind of get into a work stream that is focused through that day.
I have a question. Like, when you're starting up something new, how do you protect your idea? Just like in general, like how do you protect it from anybody else getting it? Your great idea.
Yeah, that's a critical question, and it's one I get asked a lot actually in the funding cycles, because in the software world, it's really easy to come. And that's actually a strategic decision you'll have to make if you're launching, say, a platform, is whether to go open source and try to go more network effect, or to go proprietary side. But I have found in the past that the best way to protect your IP is to move fast. So when we launched our corporate booking tool, we were actually the 24th competitor in the marketplace, behind other very large companies and all that. We just moved really fast. And the other factor is back to design. So focusing on simple, lovable, complete, rather than trying to do everything for everybody. So the more focused you are on the particular audience and particular business problem, the harder it is sometimes for others to copy you, because you're so almost like overly focused on that target audience. But it's hard. It's really hard to create a moat these days. You can do it with data. You can do it with algorithms. You can do it with strategic partnerships. So we did in the early days of Concur, where we had an exclusive agreement with a reseller with ADP. So they had 900 sales reps out there selling our product exclusively. And then American Express did the same thing. You can do it. Now, in terms of your team itself, like hire the best lawyer you can, make sure you protect your IP, make sure you just are organized from a legal standpoint, so everybody signs an NDA. It's hard to get the finance guys to. I mean, the venture capitalist doesn't sign NDAs, but they've seen your idea 10 times before. But in terms of your team members, make sure that they all sign agreements, and that anybody who particularly anybody who gets equity in your business is on board, committed. So.
Thank you. Any other questions before we close out?
That one, yeah. Obviously, through the pandemic and all those things that you've talked about, you have knowledge of risks and things that you don't always share with your entire team or whatever. Given that, and given some of the challenges during the pandemic, like how did you keep up morale? Like how do you keep your team morale? You talked about building culture, but how did you keep up morale during tough times?
That's a great question. I try. I don't know if I've done the best job of it. I think that over communication. So this lesson goes all the way back to 9/11. My office was actually in right next to the Pentagon, so I lived the experience, and I remember comparing notes with other companies that were in the DC area, where their leadership went into a bunker after that happened, and the culture just collapsed. Whereas our CEO was very verbose, and he was very just there with us, and just very, very supportive and very communicative. And so he was an over communicator, and that was a good lesson learned. So I think during the pandemic, I've been particularly focused on celebrating success, calling out somebody even in team meetings, asking somebody else, like asking one of the executives to recognize the contributions of team members publicly. That's really important. The other thing, back to the social hours, I've actually just tasked each one of the leaders to run one of the social hours. So some of the ideas they come up with have been great. Some of the little geekies, a little far-fetched, but it's been able, we've been able to create culture that way. We're trying to decide right now, like what we do with holiday gifts virtually. But I think the most important thing is back to people, back to recognizing, celebrating success together. So.
I have a question from online that I'll ask because our speakers aren't working so well. Someone wants to know, what have you found to be successful and not successful in raising money?
Ooh, that's a good question. I wouldn't say that I'm the world's biggest expert in raising money, but I have been around it for 25 years and done it myself now 4 times. Always be realistic in your business plan, because investors can spot silliness pretty quickly. Back to your great question about early traction. So focus on that early traction, because that will increase your multiples significantly when you can show that traction and they see the promise of that. I would say that my lesson learned, so Relify was a unique situation because the seed rounds have been out of Germany. And so the biggest lesson learned there is the valuations are totally different. And I've always known there's a difference between East Coast, West Coast in the US. Lived that myself. The first startup I joined was an East Coast based company. We built a real business with real revenue, real margins. A couple of years later, we acquired a company called TripIt in San Francisco. Almost no revenue, same valuation, as us. And I'm like, how does that work? So there's a difference, but I think one of the challenges we're faced with right now is that the seed round of valuations came out of Germany, and now I'm looking at the next round happening in the US, and so we have to kind of recalibrate people's thinking. So that's a challenge. I don't know that that's the typical challenge people face. Another lesson that's really important is be concise in your raise, right? So set the expectation with investors that you're closing in 90 days, and work like heck to finish it then, because if it drags out, then you lose sight of the operational side of the business. As CEO.
Great, thank you for your question. Whoever asked it online, but that brings us to the end of our time, sadly. But thank you, Peter, so much for being here with us today and for sharing your story and your experience.
You're welcome. I applaud you all for starting ventures. If you're here because you're either have started one or you're interested in doing one, so I just say do it. You won't regret it.